Hey, welcome to part two. So, part one, I gave a very quick summary of the community meal and very quick summary of what's happening there and in that space. So now I'm going to talk about a bit more in depth of some of the families who came along to the meal and what's happening in the space of their home and in their household. So first is Leah. So Leah goes along to the community meal. She also goes along to some other meals. She told me about when she goes along to some of the other meals, it's a bit hard because one of them was in a car park. And when they gave you their meal on a paper plate, it was a bit hard to eat off it with the plastic knives and forks. But also there was nowhere to sit. So when she was eating at those meals, she was quite literally sitting in the gutter eating her food. And she contrasted that to the community meal where I was going, where you get somewhere nice to sit down and eat your meal properly and eat a proper meal. And that really highlighted, encapsulated that sense of disposable plates for disposable people. That people like Leah know when they're being treated as less than. They appreciate the food, they're hungry, they need the food, but they also know that they're being seen as less than, devalued, dehumanised. It's not a dignifying space. It's certainly not a space of respite for them. So Leah, again, as she says in the quote, feels a great deal of sense of shame at having to need the meals. It's not just the going to the meals, it's that shame at having to need the meals that she can't quite manage on her own to feed herself and her daughter during the week. And went along with her when she did her supermarket shopping. And again, Leah was quite whakama about me going shopping with her. And a lot of that was around just simply not having the money to be able to go to the supermarket. So how do you do a shopping expedition with someone when there isn't the money to purchase food? So on this occasion, Leah did have some funds. So I went along with her when she went to the supermarket. The items in her trolley, that's her whole week. That's a whole week's worth of groceries for her and her daughter, and that's what they will live off because that's all she has the money for. And it's not like there's food at home. And I want to be quite clear that at home the cupboards are bare. So this, what is in the trolley, this is it for them to eat. You'll notice that Leah has made some really sensible decisions about the sorts of food she buys. So she buys food that won't go off. She's got a litre of UHT milk in there, which is more expensive than regular milk, but it doesn't go off. So that will last for the week. You won't have to throw it out because it's gone off in 4 days' time. She's also bought things like 2-minute noodles, which not only don't go off in the cupboards, but they taste nice, they're hot, they're filling, they're tasty, and they don't require a lot of energy in terms of electricity costs to cook. Most of what Leah cooks is easily cooked in that she knows that she doesn't have any money for power and electricity, so she's deliberately choosing meals that don't take a lot of electricity to cook. The pies, the 2-minute noodles, bread, eggs. They're inexpensive. They'll make a whole meal. They'll stretch out and last for a week. And they don't require a lot of money in terms of the power and electricity to be able to cook them. There is a number of both published work and in public discourses really demonising people for the sorts of food decisions they make, saying they're not buying the right sorts of foods, or and foods aren't nutritious enough, or there's not enough vegetables, or there's not enough fresh fruit. When you consider how little Leah has left over after just simply paying for housing and basic living costs, very little each week for food. And she makes really sensible, sound, well thought out decisions regarding the sorts of food she buys because she knows it's got to last a week. She knows that sometimes when it gets to the end of the week, she's maybe got a packet of noodles, maybe a pie. She's got 4 days until the next day the money comes in. And the only way that she will get fed in those days is if she goes into town And but when I say go into town, it's a 45-minute walk. So she's just not wandering around. She's like, it's a 45-minute walk. I'll need to lead at this time. And she'll walk in, um, sometimes spend a bit of time in town, and then have the meal and then walk home again. So it's not just a quick up the road. Very intentional about this is the only time I'm going to get fed today. Leah, again, her family and her friends are just as broke as she is. There's not some pie in the sky network of family and friends there for her to help. Her family and friends do help and they do their best, but they don't have resources either. So there are no resources to go around. It's simply a matter of stretching it out, making do, going hungry, and doing the best to get by. The other photograph I've included is a combined montage from the Corper family. And these are photographs that Janine took of their world of food for the week. So photographing just the ordinary meals, items that they cook. Janine and her partner and her two young daughters live in one bedroom of a state house. So also in the house are Janine's parents, her siblings, one of her siblings' partners, her auntie's partner, their daughter, and young son. So there's a lot of people in the house, around 20. Fluctuated between 14 and 25 during the interviews, depending on who was there and who wasn't. That in and of itself is simply a response to the absence of enough resourcing. So they cannot afford to rent a private rental, because if they do, then that soaks up all their food money. So there's this tension between this is a solution to poverty. This is a solution to not making sure that people have enough funding to get a house and food. And the family has chosen that they would rather pull their resources and crowd together in this tiny house, which comes with its own issues. It's not a perfect solution. But again, and given the circumstances, very capable, well thought out, reasoned response to living with not quite enough all the time. And you'll see in the images again that this family aren't frittering their money away on fancy items. These are really basic food items that they are purchasing and cooking. They are stretching the resources they've got very well to feed everybody. It's not start that sentence again. It is a very particular learned skill about navigating not just food preferences in the household, but also making the resources they've got stretch out and pad out, constantly working out where can we get this extra food from, how can we make it work. One of the ways that this household responds and makes it work is not just through crowding together, but everybody's accessing slightly different areas. So someone will go to a food bank and get additional food from the food bank. Someone else might go to Work and Income and access a food grant from Work and Income. Someone else might go to the local church and do a bit of work in order to get some additional food and resources. One of the household members goes busking, so he'll take his guitar, he'll go up the road, he'll busk for a couple of hours, and then when he gets enough, he'll go and buy bread and milk and then come home with the bread and milk. So again, lots of different ways of figuring out how they can bring in and pull their resources to make sure the family gets enough food to eat. And in that slide too, I've included some of the theories and theorists that I've drawn from in analysing and discussing and writing out the research. So looking at theories around making do in everyday life, looking at things like mimesis, where some of this stuff, particularly with food insecurity and poverty, there aren't the social narratives to be able to talk about it particularly well. There's very difficult to articulate the horror and the fear and the worry and the stress and the anxiety associated with not being able to adequately feed your children. And people, in response, people don't necessarily say that. It comes out in different ways and different things and a bit obliquely. And sometimes it's our work as researchers to break open some of those statements into looking at what's happening behind it, not just, particularly with food insecurity, people don't want to say, oh, I can't afford to feed my kids because of the shame and the embarrassment and the distress that goes along with it. So they'll say other things instead. And in research, it's about getting past that socially accepted line into some of the reality of what's going on. And using case studies, but also in this work, the information you get, it's scattered. So when I'm talking about the corporate family, the information didn't all come out in one interview. Over series of 8 interviews with different people in the house, different pieces of information came out, and a lot of it now is going back and sorting through it and pulling it all together and then doing something with it. So it's a lot harder and a lot more challenging than perhaps some standard research, but you get more interesting information and are able to really get into some of these quite difficult issues around poverty and precarity and food insecurity. And lastly, I've included a link to my article on nutritionism, where I really get stuck into that attitude that if you're not having proper food, you're better off not eating at all. And that came through in some really horrendous published research where homeless people were lined up at community meals and researchers would take their bloods and their conclusions would be, oh, they're nutritionally deficient, we need to give them a vitamin C tablet. Oh, I'm sorry. But there are wider issues relating to their health, whether or not they're getting enough vitamin C. Someone's homeless, they're sleeping on the street, they're at risk. There's a whole bunch of other things that are probably more important than their blood work. Anyway, that's enough. I'll leave it there. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Just email me and I'll do my best to respond. Cheers.